Hey everyone, today I want to talk about whether inside IR35 contracting is still worth it in 2025 and beyond. You'll hear a lot of people say there's no point doing inside of IR35, you're going to get taxed a crazy amount, or it's really glorified self-employment, it's not really real employment, self-employment, so to speak. You'll hear all these different things, but I want to give a slightly different perspective, especially for somebody who's looking to become a solopreneur or self-employed individual within the UK. Now, one really important thing I want to note, if you're looking to start some sort of consultancy within the UK, you're better off, for many, not for everyone, you're better off essentially doing solo contracting or consulting. Because the amount of work and time that's required to do the paperwork to actually complete bids and tenders will take some time. And you may even end up making the same amounts anyway. So bear all this stuff in mind. So the first sort of thing I want to talk about when it comes to inside of IR35 is that people say there's no real benefits that you get from it. You don't get the same benefits if you were a permanent 9 to 5er. Now, of course, you won't get certain benefits when it comes to certain things. However, there's a number of things that you have to bear in mind that is not deemed as benefits necessarily. Number one, you have the ability to negotiate your day rate. You still have that right. There are some recruitment agencies or agents who try to impose a certain day rate onto an individual. And the reality is you don't have to take that day rate. Now, sometimes that may result in you not getting the contract, which is perfectly fine in many cases. But in other cases, it may mean that you have some wiggle room and you have the opportunity to push up your day rate where is sensible, okay? And this is where I start talking about understanding market conditions and talking to other contractors to understand exactly what they get paid as well. You can do more in terms of like what you deem as your own working term, so to speak. So when it comes to leave and stuff, you can take leave when you want. No one can say no to you in that way because you're a contractor. You're not tied to the HR system of that organization. Okay. So there is a bit more freedom in that sense. If you want to take a break, you take a break, Yes, there is the imitation of having some sort of line management and all that kind of stuff there because you are filling a gap to a degree, but not every inside IR35 contract is set up that way. They are set up in ways where you are completely autonomous. And in fact, you're actually doing an outside role, but because the organization may be scared to essentially put your status as outside because they don't want to get fined, then you become an inside IR35 contractor. The other thing I want to say, which is a really big perk, and some people may not like this because there's a lack of security, so to speak, is that you can negotiate your notice period. By default, it's going to be a 0-day notice period. And actually, that's worked in my favor in times where I've wanted to leave. But more recently, there have been situations where, especially in the public sector, they would prefer if you had 1 to 4 weeks notice period. And of course, that makes sense for you if you're an individual who is thinking about planning when it comes to your finances, etc., etc. You don't have to do this. It's just a preferred route, so to speak. Okay. But remember, all of this stuff is up for negotiation, and that is what defines the benefits of contracting, whether you are inside or outside. So really, inside IR35 isn't the necessary end goal. It can be an opportunity for you to, again, test the waters and understand how to get into that whole self-employment space. I think is a great test, if I'm honest with you. But it gets even more important because the next point is more focused on making sure that you negotiate like a business owner. Why do I say this? If you are in a situation where you are given X day rate, let's say you're given £300 for a project management role and you know the market is going for 450 at least, then this is where you start talking about value. You start talking about the fact that actually, given the fact that there are deductions with IR35 and I get taxed such that it's similar to a 9 to 5 employee, in order for me to make this viable and me for to produce high performance sort of like outputs, I charge this per day. Because what they're not taking into consideration is the fact that, number one, you've got holiday to think about for yourself. You don't get paid holiday pay. Number two, you don't get paid sick pay. Number three, in terms of all these perks that they talk about that employees get, you have to provide that for yourself if it's not already provided by your umbrella company. So you have to think about things differently. It's not worth your while if you're getting paid the same as you did in your 9 to 5. It's just not worth your while. And so you have to explain that in a diplomatic sense. Or you could just say, no, that's not my rate. I charge £450 per day. So these are things to bear in mind. Like, you don't want to discount your worth just because of the market. Of course, there are some situations where it has to happen. And the way you recognize whether you just take on a lower sort of like rate is if the employment rate is below 75%. How do you know that? Type it into Google. Why do I say 75%? That's the standard that the UK government tries to aim for. Now, of course, that doesn't mean every industry or niche is going through the same sort of like effects based on market drivers and stuff. You kind of have to do a bit of a test, and you do this litmus test by speaking to other agents, speaking to other contractors, speaking to hiring managers, checking the markets, the job markets for yourself, seeing what's out there for your type of role. And that's when you'll know. That's when you'll have an idea. So bear all this stuff in mind. So don't discount your worth. Think more about when is the right time to negotiate up, or when is the best time to just accept what it is that you have. Before we continue, if you're somebody who's looking to get into contracting or consulting and you want to make sure that you're ready, I've got a survey that I've created below. It's in its beta stages, as I've said in previous videos. So you can check it out. It's about 5 minutes to take, and it will assess you based on whether you are ready to jump into this world or not. So click the link below in the description to find out more information. The third thing is that contracting, inside or outside, it doesn't really matter, gives you the ability to widen and deepen your network. I always come back to the COVID years, when I was working inside of IR35, and I was working with literally the top 4 and or 5 consulting groups, not including BCG. So the EYs, the Deloitte's, the KPMGs, all of those ones, the PwCs, worked with all of them. Obviously not every single consultant in the sun, but worked with all of them in some capacity. I worked with really smart individuals within the science space, within the genomics space, other scientists that were contributing to trying to solve this issue centered around COVID. I worked with individuals from the private sector, from Amazon and this place and that place. It was a huge cesspool of individuals working together to try and solve this thing. Now, of course, COVID was a rare event, but there were going to be projects or programs that require the expertise of really talented individuals. And if you're within that space, you should rate yourself and actually use that opportunity to connect with these individuals, learn more about who they are. It allows you to rub shoulders with credible senior stakeholders. And you never know, these individuals may end up being the people who hire you later on. I know that when I finished that saga, I was sought after by quite a lot of the directors to work with them. Now, I had a choice to continue with them or to go on another venture with them or whatever it may be. But it's because I had a good working relationship with them. And of course, because they understand the contracting landscape, whether I ended up working with them in an inside or outside of IR35 capacity, or even permanent if I decided to go down that route, they would think of me because of the value that I delivered. I've already spoken about how you articulate your value, so you can check some of my previous videos, especially within the contracting playlist as well. So having that network is really key, but also being within this inside IR35 space allows you to understand how to better Work out how to solve specific types of problems. You can start building certain offerings. So there are certain documents that you may have done, or reports you may have developed, or audits you may have created. That could be a service in itself. So there's definitely room to essentially rub shoulders with the right people and widen your network. But of course, that isn't the only thing. There are some more things to consider. You know, in many ways, the next thing to think about is the fact that inside IR35 could be an exit strategy for you in many ways. What do I mean by this? Well, I've spoken about the fact that if your day rate, for example, is £500 a day and you're roughly working 45 times a week, you want to put yourself in a position where you at least put away your day rate each week. That would make sense if you can do it. And if you can't do that, you put that towards the debt that you need to pay off each week. That should be the aim, because if you're making gross 2,500, you're not going to get that. Maybe you get 1.5, okay, 1.5 or 1.4, whatever it may be. I'm just making this up. But the day rate should go towards, again, savings or whatever it may be, and the rest you use for whatever you want to use it for. And that's an aggressive savings strategy. That helped me quite a bit. That helped me get my property. That helped me pay off a big bad boy debt that I had back in the day. That helped me pay for many other stuff as well. So I wouldn't knock the inside thing. It helped me pay off my student loan much, much faster, because obviously, you know, it's they base the payments from a student loan standpoint from a weekly basis as opposed to a monthly basis, and because the payments are higher, it's paid off quicker, which means you make even more money. Okay, so bear that in mind. But of course, as you make more, there is potential for more tax as well. Of course, in addition to savings, you can use that money to fund your side hustles or your real passions or your real business that you want to try and grow. Whether this is a form of coaching, training products, or whatever it may be. Because remember, and again, I haven't really spoken about this, but this is something you should be sort of cognizant of. Consulting can be broken down into 3 key elements, okay, if you're solo. The delivery arm, this is the inside and outside IR35 stuff. The productized arm, this could be some form of course, this could be advisory work, this could be something to that degree, like an audit or reporting style thing. And also the coaching. This is where you may help, I don't know, C-suite executives or those looking to get into a position that you're looking to get into. That's it. You don't need to do anything else. And that gives you the portfolio that you need in order for you to be strong. I might do a separate video on this to talk about it in a bit more detail. So again, if you're still unsure whether inside of IR35 is still a thing to get into, even as a good training ground, you need to think about the bigger picture. And you have to think to yourself, what do you truly want? If you're seeking more flexibility, if you're seeking more control over your security and stability, if you're looking to build your own business, okay, then inside of IR35 may be a good way to start. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want an outside role, what's the best way to get? Start with an inside, man. Seriously. You just get what you're given initially. I'm telling you. Because think about the opportunity cost. You could be waiting for an outside IR35 role. You know, these are hard to get unless you create your own opportunity. And I might talk about this in another video. But you could be potentially making £80,000 as an example, because you know you decided to take on a certain specific role inside of IR35, whatever it may be, as opposed to just waiting for an outside role. I said that really weird, but I think the point I'm making is don't delay if there's money on the table, just because inside, outside, whatever it may be. Yeah, I get it, but the opportunity's there. Because as you do more, you start to build more experiences, more things in your CV. You can badge it more project specific, like anyway. The difference between an outside and inside can be negligible at times, because there are many organizations that are offering inside roles that are really outside. So you're not. I think the only downside is the tax element, but you're still making more money. Or let me rephrase it: you're still keeping more money. You're still keeping more money relative to what you were doing before, because of how much more you're making. But of course, every situation is going to be different. You have to do the opportunity costs, see what makes sense. If your day rates are too small, then maybe it doesn't benefit you, and you need to work out what that is. I think anything above 575 day rate makes sense for most people. And if it's below that, then of course, if it comes to your sort of annualized, wages when it comes, or your salary when it comes to your permanent role, you have to see what the difference is pro rata, and taking into consideration if you are on sick leave, holiday, all of that kind of stuff. There, I just times it by 80% or 75%, whatever makes sense. So hopefully this gives you a clear idea of why actually you should lean into inside if you can. If there is an opportunity to go inside, do inside of IR35. Don't be afraid to do it just because, some people online say, oh, but outside's better. It doesn't mean inside is bad, But do not be deluded, my friend. It's still an opportunity. I promise you. Anywho, hopefully this has given you some value. If you want to see more videos centered around portfolio careers, contracting, consulting, and the alike, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.